I love cars. I'm pretty sure you do too. Today I'm honoured to share with you the result of one man's quest to create his perfect car. It all began 5 years ago with the purchase of an old Datsun, a car so far gone it was nicknamed the 240 Shed. The engine was past its best, the body shell shot to pieces. Most people would have considered it scrap, but not Ryan. He saw great potential. A build process began. The shell was stripped, sanded and rebuilt. The engine entirely reworked and upgraded. Brakes, suspension, interior, all new. No stone was left unturned. 5 years of grit, determination, countless hours and a lot of money turned this into this.
Hello everybody, it's been a pretty good year for me, 2019. I've managed to bag some pretty special cars, and although as you can probably tell we are coming very much towards the end of the year, I've been able to secure one last real treat for you, certainly if you're a fan of classic Japanese stuff. You see, my relationship with classic cars is a bit of an odd one. There's quite a few out there that I generally like, plenty that I really don't, and an awful lot that are in between. For me, classic cars really sort of begin with the 80s and end with sort of, I suppose, the mid-90s. There's a few things from the 60s that I quite like the look of, but generally the driving experience doesn't quite live up to modern expectations, and the 70s, as far as I'm concerned, was a very dark period in terms of styling. However, if you were to make me choose one car from the 1970s to own, I have very little hesitation in choosing one of these. Today I am driving a beautiful Datsun 240z. Now this is not just any old 240z either. This one has been rather extensively modified by its caring and extraordinarily passionate owner, Ryan. And I'm very grateful to him for bringing it out to me today despite the somewhat inclement conditions present. Earlier this year, I hosted a reasonably sized stand at Jap Show, a Japanese car enthusiast meet at Santa Pod, the UK's drag strip. I somehow managed to bagsy Honda UK's very own 2005 NSX, a gorgeous, stunning, pristine car, and we parked this next to it. I can tell you that there are very few things which will steal looks away from an immaculate NSX, but this is one of them. People were drawn in by the Honda's gold and shiny exterior, but the thing they stayed looking at was this, and I can completely understand why. There are quite a few modifications to this car, and so in order to try and get them as right as I can, I will now talk you through them.
The car's restoration was significant, going right down to the bare metal. Every single bush was replaced and upgraded. Arms were replaced or refurbished. Coilovers are courtesy of BC Racing and brakes from Willwood. The wheels are genuine race items. The 280Z engine that came with the car was fully stripped and rebuilt, being bored out to around 3 litres. It got forged rods, pistons and custom cams. All of the valve gear was upgraded and a set of Genv throttle bodies installed. This was then matched with a lightened flywheel, uprated clutch, custom exhaust and a 200 SX gearbox with a short shifter. The interior was fully retrimmed with Cobra seats and some race-inspired features. For the full list of modifications, check out the description below.
Quite a bit, isn't it? One other thing to note is the fact that the car is currently on Yokohama AD08R tyres. and so until I'm confident that they're warm and gripping, I am going to be taking this very gently indeed. The car's also pretty cammy, only really starting to make power at about 4,000 RPM up until about 7.5. The cam itself apparently is good for a lot more, but the rest of the engine isn't quite up to the task. And the cost of NA tuning means that Ryan did have to draw a line somewhere, and that for him was it. And perhaps it's because I've driven so many radically different and very unusual cars, but I'm not actually finding this car anywhere near as difficult or daunting to drive as Ryan seemed to make out. I'm sure if I was trying to press on, I might change my tune a little bit, but for now, I'm actually rather enjoying it. Aside from the fact that I am utterly terrified of the conditions and the simple combination of 1,100 kilos, 260 horsepower, and not masses of weight over the back. Those numbers, by the way, are comparable, well, in terms of weight at least, to a Lotus Exige. This is a very lightweight car. I honestly think that everything he's done in here just seems to work so well. It's this beautiful mixture of stock and modified, and it's all just works so well. You could tell me that this was a car that somebody built 20 odd years ago, and I would very much believe you. The only really sort of out of place modern looking thing is the strut brace in the back, which isn't actually carbon fibre, it's an aluminium, a very expensive Japanese brace wrapped in carbon. The restoration process for this car took quite some time, if for no other reason than some of the parts can be quite tricky to get a hold of. But I'm so glad that he did take the time, and we were supposed to film this review a few months ago, but classic car ownership and trying to be available on a certain day are two things that rarely agree with each other. Low down there is a reasonable amount of pull, and okay, the car's fairly noisy in here. The noisiest thing is a little bushing that's slightly loose down here in the gear lever, but this is, as with all classic resto mods, a continuous work in progress. There is just something about the 240Z though that to my eyes just looks right. You could very easily make the argument that, like many Japanese cars, the design of this is highly derivative of many other pre-existing Western ideas. But you know what? It's very easy to simply copy another idea that somebody's already had. But it's not easy at all to do something in the same style but make it your own. And I really think that's what the Japanese engineers did. Every now and again I'll see a Triumph GT6 and for a moment I'll think that I've spotted one of these. However, to date, I don't think I actually ever have seen one of these on the road. The brake pedal pulses quite a bit. It does have a servo assistance to it, which is probably why it's doing it. And they do work. They're racy pads, and it's typical for those. It means you do have to work them reasonably hard, but that's fine, I like that. It means you can modulate the brakes a little bit easier. And I have a sneaking suspicion this car does not have ABS. The steering feel is quite interesting. There is a little bit of a dead spot in the centre, and that apparently is due to the steering rack not being in the best condition. Unfortunately, that is one of a large number of items that you also simply cannot get, and to refurbish it could take an awful lot of time and money, and frankly, I think Ryan just wants to enjoy this car. And I've got to give him a massive shout out for actually taking it out and enjoying it and using it in the middle of October, which is when we are filming this. There's an awful lot of people that about a month and a half ago would have said, right, that's it, the toy's going away in the shed, but not this man, so props to him. The view out the front is absolutely, utterly magical. It really, really is. And it's very evocative of many classic British cars such as the E-Type and the MGB, which cost about the same as one of these when they were new. Values these days are so hard to pin down because the cars are very rare. They come in all sorts of different specifications, conditions, and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to let you guys into a little secret. Once upon a time, my father used to own a Jaguar E-Type, a very nice one indeed. However, he sold it the same year that I got my driving license. But not a car that I was ever sad I never got to drive. If you gave me a choice between an E-Type and one of these, hand on heart, every single time, it would be the little Datsun. And I would make that choice simply, purely on looks. I think the E-Type just, it looks a bit wrong. And I know, so controversial. It's supposed to be one of the most beautiful cars of all time, but there's so many things about it that just aren't right. I mean, look at where the wheels sit on an E-Type. They're about, 6 inches in from the chassis. There's just nothing about it that's quite right. This thing, okay, granted, this is a very modified example, but it just sits and works so well. The E-Type's almost comically proportioned. This thing is just, perfection. It's very narrow and it's got a real habit of following the camber, but she really sings me into the top reaches of the rev range. Now in my head, the first thing I'm thinking of in terms of sound is something like a crazy BMW CSL. I would say it's not silly quick, but actually I've just looked down there and actually we are travelling at a reasonable rate of knots. And you can do that with it. Oh, it's lovely. So the steering, once it hooks, has got a decent amount of feel and feedback. You can feel the weight of the car. Okay, 1100 kilos doesn't sound like a lot in a car, but have you ever tried to lift 1100 kilos? It's a lot. And so I appreciate this car for being nice and good to pilot, and it talks to you. And to be fair, it's probably got a lot more grip to it than I'm giving it credit for, but you just feel the back end just a little bit. There's a little bit of grease and oil down on that corner. It's notorious for it. This is really delightful. I mean, I don't feel like I'm going that fast, but I'm so involved in this process. This gear shifter is absolutely mega. It's incredible. This is such a special thing. I mean, on a dry day, and maybe if I'm lucky, and maybe if Ryan's feeling kind, we might be able to see this car next year again when conditions are a little bit more kind. But I'm really glad that we managed to bagsy this car this year and get it on the channel, because it's just something unbelievably special. And I hope all of you watching at home will agree. You just carve through. The size of it is just right for these kind of roads. I've driven a lot of cars which are just too big and too quick to follow down here, and it follows modern traffic perfectly easily. Now this is running something like 110 horsepower more than it was originally designed to, but it doesn't feel like it's overburdened with power or anything like that. I know quite a few people that are trying to do crazy engine swaps in classic cars, putting BMW V10s in old Ford Capris, that kind of thing, and I've driven cars like that with their original engines and gone, no, please do not put any more power in that car. It was fine with the 130 it had, it doesn't need 500. This car feels like it's got just the right amount of power. There's a coupe LSD at the back, in other words, old-fashioned traction control. And that does keep things in order when you're trying to press on. Oh, I do like me some throttle bodies. She moves. Yeah, she does. She talks to you. This is a proper old school car, and I've driven many cars of this kind of period, and they've always been an interesting and entertaining experience. In fact, it's amazing. I've driven a lot of cars from the 80s as well, and the difference from a 70s car and an 80s car is huge. And the reality is that this is actually a 60s car. The 240z came out at the tail end of the 60s, and I just would not think that I could ever hustle a car from that era down this kind of road like this. I mean, that's a testament to the fact that it has been obviously extensively modified, but that could only be done with a platform that was inherently right. And I'm just loving it. So there we go, not so much a comprehensive review, but a taster, a little look at what I'm sure you'll agree is an absolutely incredible machine. If you've got something you'd like to see on the channel, probably won't be till next year at this rate, but please do get in touch. The details of how to do so will be in the description below. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you for the next one. Bye-bye.